Hey y'all, welcome again to the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, I am your host, Dan Hamilton. The Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush of the Texas Veterans Land Board. Today, sitting next to me is Mike McKim, CEO and founder of Cuvee Coffee. Mike, thanks for being at the table today. I want to jump right in. Can you tell our audience, the people watching at home and listening, tell us about your military history and then the founding of the coffee shop and brand that you own?
Sure. Well, my military background started right when I graduated high school, 1988, and I enlisted in the Navy. And I think one of the reasons that I ended up enlisting is because my parents did something that was really intuitive on their part. Basically, halfway through my junior year of high school, my dad got a job and we relocated from Philadelphia to Dallas, right? Which was kind of a culture shock for me.
Big change.
Big change, yeah. I was kind of in a little bit, I wasn't a tremendously troubled kid, but I was kind of in a downward spiral. Mm-hmm. And my parents acknowledged that. And my dad decided to take me on a road trip to visit all the Federal Service Academies across the country. So, we went to Annapolis and West Point and Coast Guard Academy and Air Force Academy and Kings Point. And what that did for me was it established a goal. And my dad was a pilot. And I was like, wow, I really want to fly jets in the Navy. I want to be a naval aviator. So I want to go to the Naval Academy. That kind of planted a seed. I was a terrible student, graduated in the bottom 10% of my class. So
just disinterested for the most part, or?
Yeah, I just was, I was lazy, I was unmotivated, I was just going through the motions, had no goals,
right?
Really. And, because of my parents, I established a goal. Obviously, there's no way I was going to get into Annapolis, graduating the bottom 10% of my class. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, well, I'll enlist in the Navy and I'll work my ass off and see if I can get there. So I spent the next 4 years applying and reapplying, taking college courses, basically everything that the admissions chief I was assigned to told me to do. Yeah. I did. No matter where I was in the world, even during deployment, I was taking college classes. My last year, the fourth time I attempted to get into the Naval Academy, I would have aged out. So it was my last opportunity. Yeah. I was 22. And I didn't get accepted to Annapolis, but apparently, those admission folks, particularly when you're talking about bringing enlisted people into one of the Federal Service Academies, there's kind of a network. And so the chief that I was assigned to from the Naval Academy, I guess he was talking to a couple other admissions people from other Federal Service Academies and said, look, I got this kid, he's worked his tail off the last 4 years, does anybody have a place for him? And so a commander over at the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point said, you know what, I can put him on the list if somebody turns down their appointment. We can get him in. And then, sure enough, I get called to my CO's office. He said, Petty Officer McKim, congratulations, pack your bags, you're going to the Merchant Marine Academy. Wow. Yeah, so 2 weeks later, I'm in, I was in Japan at the time. 2 weeks later, I'm in New York, getting my head shaved and getting yelled at all over again.
Starting from the bottom floor,
Exactly, right? Yeah. And the cool part, the anecdotal part of that is, I didn't graduate. I failed miserably academically. But I think the really cool part is my son is a second-class midshipman there right now.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So he's a junior. He is on a naval supply ship based out of Guam right now for a sea year. And he's just doing great.
You must be tremendously proud to see that
100%.
Unfold.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you go through kind of the trials and tribulations of applying, being rejected, applying, but you obviously had a tremendous amount of perseverance. Would you say that was specifically because of the goal that you were trying to pursue? And maybe how has that perseverance impacted your coffee business?
Yeah, I think what I've learned over the years, I didn't know it at the time, but that's just a character trait that I have. And no matter what it was, if it was playing sports in grade school or it was playing an instrument or whatever it was, if I had a goal, I was relentless in trying to achieve that goal. I just wouldn't stop. And not because anybody told me don't ever give up or anything like that.
Right.
That just came naturally. So yes, that is that persistence, 100%, is just something that has helped me achieve goals over the years for sure. And yes, to answer your question, 100% carried it into the coffee business.
So before Cuvée, you must have found maybe a time where you didn't have a goal.
Oh yeah.
You found a time where you left the service, you were outside of the military, and I think what many veterans face is the absence of a goal. So what kept you persevering through that time?
Man, I think there were a couple things. So yes, when I ended up leaving Kings Point, leaving/failing out of Kings Point, I was delivering pizzas. I was just doing whatever I could to get by.
Scratching and clawing?
Yeah, trying to figure out what my next move was. And I think, one of my goals was my now wife, Rochelle, we were dating at the time, I would like to marry Rochelle, and I would like to be able to provide for her. So that was kind of a goal. I didn't know how I was going to do that.
Right.
And so I did a lot of things from, delivering pizzas to telemarketing to, somehow I ended up in the telecom industry and selling fiber optic cable and then through a series of events got introduced to coffee. And that's when I really got bit, with the passion when I was introduced to coffee roasting.
So tell us about that introduction. Tell us about who brought you into the coffee business. And before you tell us who brought you into that story, prior to that introduction and prior to learning to love coffee, did you have any interest in the coffee business before this process started?
So, people laugh at me when I tell them this. No, my idea of drinking coffee was going to the coffee beanery in the mall.
Okay.
That was near the apartment where Rochelle and I lived, and I would get this concoction that was coffee and chocolate syrup and orange flavoring and whipped cream. Yeah, that was my introduction to coffee.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought coffee was.
That was your baseline.
That was it, man. The introduction was really cool. While I was in the telecom business with a high school buddy of mine from Dallas, we went on vacation with our wives and we were skiing in Tahoe. And I said, look, I've got an uncle who owns a business in Reno, cool guy, he drives a Ferrari and really successful. And since we both were kind of entrepreneurial minded, we went to visit him. And my Uncle Carl, he says to me, he owns a company called Agtron there. They make food analyzation equipment. And he was working on a machine that measured the degree of roast of coffee. So instead of saying light, medium, dark, he had this machine, you would put coffee in it. It used near-infrared technology that reflected off different chemical compounds, assigned it a number, and that's the international industry standard for roast classification, right?
Wow. What an introduction.
Yeah, it was really cool. And he had this...
Very technical and very cutting edge.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could explain a little more in depth, but most of it's over my head.
Okay, yeah.
But he had this little coffee roaster set up in his warehouse, and he said, have you ever seen coffee roasted before? And we were like, no. And he roasts coffee with me and my buddy Patrick, and we were just like, oh man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so we were like, do you want to go skiing today? No, let's just roast coffee. And so we spent the day roasting coffee with my uncle, and that was it. We ended up buying a roaster, started roasting coffee as a hobby, and I always tell people it's like every craft brewery owner you've ever met. They start brewing beer in their garage, their basement, or whatever it is. And then one day they're like, hey, people love my product. Let's turn it into a business and open a brewery. And that's what we did. So roasting coffee was our side hustle. We would sell fiber optic cable during the day, roast coffee on the weekends.
Can you tell the audience, when you are selling the coffee to friends and family, what was the rest of the coffee industry like? Because if you're watching at home and you're used to the coffee explosion from the last 15 or 20 years, were you before that? Were you right in the middle of that? Kind of set the table for the industry standards for coffee, maybe from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, this was 1998.
Okay.
So there was a coffee movement in '98, but it was really happening in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, and that was pretty much it. Yeah, and it was just the very beginning.
Would you say that you were the only one that you knew in your network who was kind of selling coffee and trying to produce it? And
in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's selling, what we call now craft or specialty coffee.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah, which seems really cool, being the pioneer of something.
Yeah.
But like a good friend of mine once told me, be careful because pioneers get all the arrows and settlers get all the land.
That's true, huh? You're on the forefront of learning all the difficulties of the business and even the coffee, the taste, and everything.
Yep. Yeah, so the specialty coffee industry was really non-existent in Texas. And, we were buying specialty coffee, so we were paying higher prices for the raw product. Mm-hmm. And everybody that we talked to, everybody that I went out and did a taste test with, they said, yeah, your coffee is so much better than stuff I'm buying now, but it's 50 cents a pound more, so I can't buy it. Right? And it's crazy.
So people might hear that and say, hey, 50 cents a pound more. If I go to Kroger and there's something that says $4 and there's another one that says $4.50, not a big deal. But 50 cents a pound, if you're buying on a mass-produced scale or on a large scale, quickly adds up, right? And that was kind of where the rub was with you guys, is how do we reduce the cost for a large distributor or somebody who would purchase your product?
Yeah, our margins were so thin at that. We were literally selling coffee for $5 a pound wholesale, right? Because just the cost of raw product was way cheaper back then. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't us reducing our cost, it was us finding the right customers or developing the right customers. And fortunately, unfortunately, we were a little ahead of the curve. Fortunately, we were a little ahead of the curve. So when that third wave, they call it third wave coffee, started, people kind of knew about Cuvée. And since we were the only, third wave roaster in Texas, we got a lot of people coming to us saying, hey, I'm opening a new coffee shop. I want a great roaster to partner with. Yeah. I don't want to have to go to Seattle, right, to get my coffee. Right. I'd like to get it in Texas. And so that's how the business was really built, was selling to independent coffee houses as the third wave coffee shop movement happened.
So when did you see yourself going from, selling to friends and family, and then you kind of take one or two steps up where you're starting to make relationships with the business community? But when did you kind of hit that third or fourth wave where you go, oh, this is going to be sustainable?
Yeah.
Was there a purchase that you made or a sale that you made or a specific time that you can remember and go, oh, wow, this is actually going to work?
Yes. So there was a gap between '98 and 2001 where my buddy Patrick and I were, doing our telecom job, full time, and then doing coffee part time, and then the whole .com implosion happened. So we ended up both losing our jobs. I didn't really like mine to begin with, and so I was like, man, I'm going to keep doing this coffee thing. And my buddy Patrick was like, well, I'm going to keep getting a paycheck.
Okay, fair enough.
Which, yes, absolutely. So I was incredibly unsuccessful selling coffee in Texas, in 2001. Through a series of events, somebody wanted to buy an espresso machine from me that was opening an independent coffee house. And so I called the company. My uncle had introduced me to the owner of the importer of this espresso machine. I called the company. I called Joe, and I'm like, hey, Joe, this is Mike, Carl's nephew. And he's like, yeah, sure, I remember you. We'll sell you an espresso machine, but, do me a favor. Don't call me anymore. We're hiring a regional manager. She's based in Atlanta, and that'll be your contact. And I go, oh, okay, cool. Have you hired her yet? And he said, no. Why? And I said, I'll take the job. He said,
on the phone, on the spot, right there.
Yeah, right there.
Kicking in the door.
Yes. He said, what do you mean? I said, I hadn't had a paycheck in 10 months. I mean, my wife told me last night, we have enough money to pay bills one more month and then we're broke. Had a brand new baby, right? So it was kind of scary. And Joe says to me, okay, Mike, we'll get back to you, click. And then every morning for the next 15 days, I called Joe at 8 a.m. Seattle time, said, hey, Joe, this is Mike. I'm ready to start. Wow. And they ended up hiring me. So they brought me up to Seattle, and that's when everything changed for me. Like I spent 5 years with them from 2001 to 2006 selling espresso machines. and then doing coffee roasting on the side. And I call that my coffee MBA. That's that was the turning point for me. Yeah. And I got to learn, I got to network, I got to meet like-minded people, other coffee entrepreneurs. And then finally in December of 2006, my coffee roasting business had grown from a weekend thing to kind of a night weekend thing to, I got to deliver coffee in the middle of the day, Wednesday, instead of selling espresso machines. Yeah. I was feeling a little guilty, about collecting a paycheck. So I retired from that and went full-time into coffee 2007.
So between the time, 2001 to 2006, you said, right? It was a 5-year period.
Yes.
So maybe, when I hear that, or maybe somebody outside of it hears that, they think that's a very short time period. But I'm actually really interested for what is people listening at home, Gen Z or millennials, post 9/11 veterans. Can you talk about the patience it requires to get to the goal that you've talked about perseverance already?
Yeah.
And again, I think our generation, specifically millennials, we have to make sure that we don't think that we should be owed something prior to getting what we deserve, essentially.
Yep.
Can you talk about that whole thing, taking your time, trying to do things right, getting the MBA, really putting in the hard work, because that's what pays off in the long run, but we have become so addicted to short-term success.
Yep.
Those two ideas seem to be, I think, kind of at odds for a lot of younger people in the workforce.
Yeah, it is. I think two things. One, it's not a new phenomenon because the get-rich-quick mentality was around even when I, started in business. So I think it's just morphed. Now there's more stories of, people generating astronomical wealth, with .com companies and things like that in a short period of time. But I always tell entrepreneurs, I always tell everybody, the first, and not, not trying to pat myself on the back or anything like that, but the first 11 years kind of sucked. I was definitely fueled by passion, not by success. There is absolutely no doubt. But, this is year 22 now, right? So the last 12 have been, we've had to adapt and change and, do things differently, look at things differently. The consumer's changed, and so the last 12 years have been, very good.
Yeah.
But now we're in the scaling phase, which is a whole nother,
a
whole nother ball game. Yeah.
So when you started the business, I'm interested in the analytical side of it, which is running a business, hiring people, margins, but there's a what I would describe as an art side or a creative side, which is actually making the coffee and making it enjoyable and setting up a space that is comfortable for people to come from. Out of those two buckets, would you say that you have one more of the other, a little bit of each, and then for the one that you didn't have, how did you support that?
Yeah. 100% I have one more than the other. I live in the creative side.
Okay.
I am terrible at numbers and management and all that sort of stuff. And honestly, that's where working with my wife, Rochelle, has been a huge value because, my goal and what I do well is move the company forward.
Right.
What she does is really runs the company as I'm moving it forward.
Okay.
So she, she's a numbers person, super detail oriented. I mean, for lack of a better term, I grow the company, she runs the company. That's really kind of the way it works. And that's, if I didn't have that, it would be a house of cards.
Absolutely. So I'm interested to know then, go back, 10 or 11 years, and when you look at the company, when you look at the success that you've had, talk to us about that process. Has it been enjoyable? Obviously, the coffee industry has boomed, so you did come in at a really great time. Tell us about your store here in Austin and just the experience of running it and seeing people come in and enjoying coffee.
Yeah. So the last, these last 11, 12 years, definitely it's not all sunshine and roses, right? But the good definitely outweighs the bad. Growing any business is riddled with challenges. vision and communication are things that I've always struggled with, communicating my vision to my team. So just trying to learn how to do that better.
Do you think you've gotten better at it?
I think I've gotten better, but I still have a long way to go.
Can you give us an example maybe of a time where, maybe going forward, right, if you were to come up with an idea or maybe something that's happened in the past couple of years where you're like, man, I have this idea and I can see it in my head. How were you able to translate that, or what were maybe some of the issues that you had to overcome to make that a reality?
Well, I think one of the things, going back to the beginning of your question, is building a team of people who have different areas of strength.
Yeah.
That has helped with that. But just in general, like my team, like the production people, they know how to roast coffee and they know how to put it in a bag and they know how to put it in a box and ship it and all. But other than that, I mean, maybe they didn't know exactly why they were doing it except to collect a paycheck, right? So now I've been able to share a little bit more of, hey, this is where we're heading. These are the customers that we're reaching. This is how the business is changing, and letting them, instead of assuming that they see that from their vantage point, making sure that they understand what I'm thinking and not thinking they're going to read my mind.
Right.
That's been a huge shift for me. I just assumed everybody thought the same way that I did. Everybody's motivated by the same things I was motivated by, and 100% not the case at all.
That's a really interesting point. So now as you look forward to the future and you talk about creating that future and then trying to communicate it to your staff and to the business, what are you most excited for about Cuvée going forward?
I think, there's a handful of things. One is there's been a few folks that have worked at Cuvée who, while they were there, caught the entrepreneurial bug.
That's awesome.
And so being able to help people, transition and open their own business has been really rewarding. So I think that's cool. And whether they're a barista at my coffee shop who wants to open their own coffee shop, whatever, or somebody who wants to open their own roasting company, right, and be a competitor. So I think that's one thing that really excites me, is being able to use the experience, right, that I've had, the things that I've learned, and help other people achieve their goals. That's super rewarding. And then, I mean, look, the whole cold brew phenomenon is just, I don't think there has been a more innovative or exciting thing to happen to the coffee industry, in the 20 plus years that I've been involved in it. It has
become a phenomenon.
Yeah.
So tell us about your, we haven't even got to this. We've talked about your entire story, and I feel like we didn't even get to touch on the Nitro cold brew that is wildly famous across the country. Yeah. And you talked about your creativity and how you came up with this concept. For folks at home who are probably been enjoying this for years now, tell us about how you came up with the concept and just the creative process behind that. Yeah,
it's funny because I by no means created cold brew. I mean, it's been around a long time. Yeah. But while I was selling espresso machines, I'm in a coffee shop, and it was west of us somewhere. I wish I could remember where it was, because I would 100% give this person the credit. But I'm in the coffee shop, I'm having a meeting with the owner, and I'm watching all these high school age kids come in, and they're pouring a drink off a beer tap and selling it to high school kids, just one after another, in a clear cup. And I was like, what the hell are you selling these kids, man? And he goes, let me show you what I'm doing. He takes me in the back, and he's brewing hot coffee, and he's dumping it into a homebrew keg, adding milk and vanilla syrup. And then he put it on tap. And he's selling basically a latte on tap. Right. Yeah. And I thought, this is genius. Yeah. And so when I got back to Texas, the handful of wholesale coffee companies that I had, coffee shops I was selling coffee to, I said, hey man, the cold brew you're making, put it in a keg, put it on tap, people will go crazy. And everybody was like, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard. Yeah, and that was in 1990. This 2007.
Okay.
Right? So I thought, okay, it's a dumb idea. And then in 2010, 11, I read an article that said 80% of all the tea in the U.S. that's consumed is consumed over ice.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I thought, man, why does tea get all the love?
Right.
Cold coffee has got to, we can grab a small percentage of this market share, and it could be massive. So I went on this journey to create a cold brew product that I thought could compete with iced tea.
Yep.
Along the way, being a craft beer enthusiast, I got introduced to Left Hand Nitro Milk Stout. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I've got a bottle of that, and I pop the top, and I pour it into a glass, and I watch that beautiful nitro cascade.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I need to do with coffee. And so the next morning, I get on the phone, I call Left Hand, and through a series of events, ended up talking to the head brewer there. And he was like, look, this is how we do nitro. This is what nitro is, and learned a lot from him. Started experimenting with that. Launched Nitro Cold Brew in kegs in 2011. And then the end goal for me was always to can it in a single serve.
Can I pause you real quick?
Absolutely.
So when you came up with the Nitro Cold Brew idea, did you have as much difficulty going to people and saying, hey, this is going to be a great idea, or because cold brew was already established at that point, you said, hey, now I can sell you this Nitro Cold Brew product? Was the sell a little bit easier?
No. It was the exact same thing as when I started roasting coffee.
Same response,
Yeah.
huh?
Everybody was like, what?
What are you doing?
Yeah. And this is where, I always chuckle to myself when people think that being first to market is so important. When the reality is, being first to market is, in my opinion, like one of the most difficult positions to be in. Yeah, it's rewarding and it's exciting and it fuels your ego.
Right.
But from a business standpoint, it is so challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought low-hanging fruit would be, I go to all my coffee shop customers that are serving cold brew, and I'm like, hey, here's what I got for you now. I got it on tap.
Yeah.
All you have to do is, boom, tap the keg, and you can serve it. And everybody was like,
looked at you like you were crazy.
yeah. So yeah, that was that was not easy. Not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Yeah.
And now they're serving it everywhere. It's a phenomenon. It really is, and it tastes great. It's just like you said. Even when you look at it, it looks appealing.
Oh yeah. Look, every single Starbucks has it now.
Yeah.
Every single one. And I actually, anecdotally, I went to this CEO roundtable with Bunker Labs. And they invited me in because the guest was Howard Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks. Yeah. And we go around the table, and everybody has, like 30 seconds to tell their military background and what they're doing now. So it gets to me, military background, and then, own a little coffee roasting company. And he says, what's it called? I said, Cuvee Coffee. He says, you have that Nitro Cold Brew, don't you?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, sir, I do. He's like, did you bring any? I was like, yes, sir, I did.
There you go.
And so I've actually got a picture of Howard Schultz drinking one of our first cans of Nitro Cold Brew. That was before they ever launched Nitro Cold Brew. Yeah, so that was super
What a
cool.
moment. Extremely rewarding, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we close this out, I think we could sit here and talk about coffee and the business for such a long time, but is there anything that you would like to tell the audience that maybe I didn't get a chance to ask? Maybe something either that you've been reading or thinking about in terms of veterans issues, and we haven't talked necessarily a lot about veteran hiring, veterans in the workforce, but before we close this one out, I just wanted to give you kind of the last word.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the things that I've learned a few years ago, I mentioned Bunker Labs. I got introduced to those guys, that group, and as I've become more involved with them, I've learned that, about 25% of people getting out of the military, transitioning out, have an entrepreneurial desire, right? They want to start their own business, but only 4% actually do. Right, so there's this 21% delta of vets who want to own their own business, but for whatever reason aren't able to do it. And so an organization like Bunker Labs, that's an ecosystem for veteran entrepreneurs, is, the last 2 years in particular, I've become, very, very involved with them. Talking to, mentoring, trying to inspire veteran entrepreneurs. So I think that's a piece that is kind of near and dear to my heart, is definitely helping other veteran entrepreneurs in, whatever form I can. And the other thing I would love to do, we've got one retail coffee bar that my wife and I own with my parents, and separate from the coffee roasting business. Sure. And it's been really successful, and I think it would be cool to expand that and, potentially expand it if there's veteran entrepreneurs out there who are interested in, help opening coffee bars, maybe a license agreement or a franchise or something like that, or just helping them open their own concept. I think that would be really rewarding, and that's kind of in my wheelhouse.
Well, that's a tremendous opportunity for veterans listening at home. If they want to reach out to you, they want to contact you, follow you, where can they find you, either on Instagram, social media, or Cuvee's website?
Yeah,
as well?
I'm Mike McKim on everything. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, just absolutely reach out anytime.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time to come to the
bet.
studio.
My pleasure.
To talk about coffee,
me.
talk about business.
Yeah, man.
For everyone at home, thank you all for joining us again. Thank you for continuing to support the veterans business community, to support the veterans community as a whole. Here we have such a great opportunity to sit down with leaders and servant leaders such as Mike McKim to talk about how we overcome struggles, continue to persevere, and follow our passions. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Dan. Have a good rest of the day. Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.